My parents took my college fund to buy my brother a car now. He's jobless, and I refused to pay their mortgage when they lost everything. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the responsible one in my family. The one who fixed the messes, kept track of bills, and worked part-time jobs while studying just to make sure we didn't fall behind. My parents always said they were proud of my discipline, but deep down, I knew they didn't see me the way they saw my younger brother, Kyle. Kyle was the golden child, the fun one, the dreamer. He could skip chores, blow his allowance, and still be treated like royalty. Whenever I'd question it, Mom would sigh and say, "He's just different, honey. Don't be so hard on him." And Dad would chuckle, adding, "Kyle's got charm, you've got grit. Both matter, but grit, apparently, didn't earn you much affection in my family." I started saving for college the day I turned 16. Every paycheck from the diner, every tip from mowing lawns, I tucked it away in a small account my parents helped me open. They promised to match whatever I saved so I could go to the best school possible. That promise became my motivation. I skipped parties, avoided debt, and worked like someone with something to prove. But around Kyle's 18th birthday, something shifted. Suddenly, all anyone could talk about was him needing a car. "He can't get to work without one," Mom said. "It's time we help him out," Dad agreed. When I mentioned college applications, they'd brush it off. "Don't worry, we'll handle it. Focus on your grades." There was a strange tone in their voices, too casual, too dismissive. I told myself I was imagining it. Still, late at night, as I checked my savings app and saw my hard-earned balance, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Something I'd worked for my whole life was quietly slipping away. The day I got my college acceptance letter was supposed to be one of the happiest of my life. I remember holding that envelope with shaking hands, reading the words "congratulations" over and over like they were written just for me. It felt like every late night, every extra shift, every sacrifice had finally meant something. I ran downstairs to tell my parents, expecting celebration. Instead, they just smiled faintly, like they were distracted. When I brought up the college fund, Dad cleared his throat. "We'll talk about that later," he said, not meeting my eyes. Later never came. Days turned into weeks, and every time I asked, Mom brushed me off. "Don't worry about money right now, sweetheart. Focus on your studies." One night, I finally logged into the account myself. My stomach dropped. The balance was 0. I stared at the screen, refreshing it again and again, hoping it was a glitch. But it wasn't. My entire college fund, 5 years of sweat and sacrifice, was gone. I confronted them immediately. "Where's the money?" I demanded, voice trembling. Mom and Dad exchanged a look that made my blood run cold. Then Dad sighed. "Needed a car. Son, he got that new job, and he can't get to work without transportation. You'll manage. You're smart. You always figure things out." Their words didn't just hurt, they shattered something inside me. I looked at Kyle, standing smugly by the doorway, jingling the keys to his new car. "You used my money," I whispered, my throat tight. Mom tried to reach for me, but I pulled away. "You'll understand one day," she said softly. No, I wouldn't. That night, I went to my room, packed my laptop, and sat in the dark until morning. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just decided that from that day forward, I'd never let them control my future again. After the shock settled, I went into survival mode. I couldn't afford the dream college anymore, but I refused to give up. I spent every night filling out scholarship applications, writing essays until my fingers cramped. During the day, I picked up extra shifts warehouse work on weekends, tutoring in the evenings. I told myself, if they won't invest in me, I'll invest in myself. Kyle, meanwhile, paraded around in that shiny new car like a king. He'd rev the engine loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, throwing in comments like, "Man, I don't know why you're still mad. It's just money." One afternoon, as I was heading to my shift, he leaned out the car window and smirked. "You're so dramatic, bro." Mom said, "You'll get over it." My parents didn't make it any easier. Whenever I tried to pull away, they'd twist the guilt tighter. "We're a family," Mom would say. "You should be happy for your brother." "He's working now," Dad added. "You'll thank us someday for teaching you resilience." That word resilience became their excuse for betrayal. But the more they tried to justify it, the quieter I became. I learned to stop arguing, to let their words bounce off me. I moved into a small apartment near the community college that finally accepted me on a partial scholarship. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every dollar I earned went to tuition, rent, or savings never home. Still, there were nights I stared at my phone, wanting to hear them say they were proud of me. The silence was my answer. One evening, while walking back from work, I saw Kyle speed past in that same car, music blasting, not a care in the world. I remember thinking, "Keep driving, Kyle. Life's got a way of catching up to people like you." It happened barely 3 months after Kyle got the car. I was on campus when Mom called, her voice shaky and panicked. "Kyle's been in an accident," she said, as if the world had ended. My heart dropped for a moment until I learned he was fine. The car, though, was totaled. He'd been speeding, showing off to his friends, and lost control on a wet road. When I got home that weekend, Kyle sat at the kitchen table with his arm in a sling, sulking like a scolded child. "It wasn't my fault," he muttered, before I could even say a word. "The road was slick, and those other drivers boxed me in." His version of the story changed each time he told it, but one detail stayed the same. Nothing was ever his fault. A few days later, Dad called me into the living room. "Your brother needs help," he said, his tone soft but loaded. "The insurance didn't cover everything. If you could lend a hand with repairs just until we get back on our feet." I laughed, but it came out bitter. "You spent my college fund on that car, and now you want me to pay for fixing it." Mom's eyes welled up instantly. "Don't talk like that," she pleaded. "Family supports family. We raised you better than this." Something in me snapped. "You raised me to clean up your mistakes," I said quietly. "Not anymore." She followed me down the hallway, her voice trembling, switching from guilt to anger. "After everything we've done for you, you're heartless." For the first time in my life, I didn't stop to explain. I grabbed my jacket, opened the door, and walked out. The cool air hit my face like freedom. That was the day. I realized love shouldn't feel like debt. Graduating college debt-free felt like crossing the finish line of a marathon no one believed I could run. Every late-night shift, every weekend of exhaustion, it all led to that single moment of freedom. When I walked across that stage, I wasn't just earning a degree. I was reclaiming everything they said I'd never have without their help. I found a stable job soon after, nothing glamorous, but solid. I rented a small apartment, learned how to cook meals that didn't come from a can, and slowly built a life that was entirely mine. No guilt, no strings, no manipulation disguised as love. Meanwhile, Kyle was still Kyle. He drifted between jobs: bartender, delivery driver, assistant at a car lot. He quit whenever things got too stressful, always landing back home with an excuse and a smirk. Every time I visited, Dad would shrug it off. "He's just figuring things out," he'd say. Mom would chime in. "He's got potential, he just needs time." Time, apparently, was endless when it came to Kyle. I stopped arguing. I realized they didn't want a son, they wanted a savior for the child they refused to discipline. So I focused on myself. Promotions came slowly but steadily, and soon I had enough saved to buy my own place, a modest 2-bedroom home with creaky floors and sunlight that poured through the windows each morning. It wasn't much, but it was mine. When I told my parents about it, they congratulated me, but there was a hint of something else. Envy, maybe, or worry. Mom mentioned, almost casually, that things had been a little tight lately. Dad nodded. "The economy's tough these days." Their words hung heavy, but I stayed quiet. I'd worked too hard to earn this peace, and I wasn't about to trade it. For guilt again, it had been almost 5 years since I bought my house when the phone rang one Sunday morning. Mom's voice was soft but shaky, the way it used to be when she wanted something. "Sweetheart, we're having a little trouble with the mortgage. Just a temporary setback. Could you help us cover a few payments?" I paused. Mortgage. I thought the house was paid off. There was a long silence before Dad took the phone. "We refinanced a few years ago," he admitted, his tone rehearsed. "We needed some flexibility, that's all. It's not a big deal, just bad timing right now." Something felt off. I asked where the money from the refinance went. Another pause. Then, almost as an afterthought, Dad said, "We helped Kyle start a business. You know, to get him on his feet." The room spun for a second. They did it again. I could practically see Kyle sitting there, pitching them another doomed idea, and them eating it up like gospel. "What business?" I asked, my voice flat. Mom hesitated. He was selling car accessories online, but it didn't work out. The market was too competitive. I let out a bitter laugh. So, you risked your house for his hobby. Her voice cracked. Don't be cruel. He's trying. That's when I heard something in the background, footsteps, a familiar cough. Wait, I said. Is Kyle living with you? Neither of them answered, but I already knew. The same brother who ruined my college dream was now sleeping under the roof I once called home while they begged me to save it. Part of me wanted to help, to protect them like I always had. But another part, the part they'd broken long ago, to bleed for them again. I hung up after promising to think about it, though deep down, I already knew what that meant. The next week, Mom called again. Her voice had that trembling edge I remembered from childhood, the tone she used whenever she wanted to make guilt sound like love. We did everything for you, she said softly. Don't abandon your family now, not when we need you most. I could almost hear Dad sighing in the background, and then Kyle's voice cut through. Bro, just help out. You're doing great. It's not a big deal for you. That single sentence sent me spiraling back through years of memories, the birthdays they forgot because of Kyle's soccer games. The time I skipped a school trip so he could get a new bike. The nights I studied by candlelight while they bragged about supporting both sons equally. They had always used love as currency, and I had spent my entire life paying for it. I tried to stay calm. Mom, I said, I can't keep fixing everyone's mistakes. Her breath hitched. You think you're better than us now? You'd rather watch us lose everything. I swallowed hard. My instinct was to comfort her, to give in and make it right. But beneath that urge was something new, anger mixed with clarity. I pictured every time they'd chosen Kyle's comfort over my future. Every time they'd praised his charm while I worked myself raw just to be noticed. I'm not abandoning anyone, I said quietly, but I'm not your safety net anymore. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Kyle's scoff in the background. Whatever, man, you'll cave. You always do. Maybe once. He was right. But not this time. I'll think about it, I told them finally, though my tone must have made it clear, already knew the answer. A week later, I drove to their house partly out of guilt, partly out of some last flicker of hope that maybe things weren't as bad as they sounded. But the moment I stepped through the front door, I knew everything had fallen apart. The living room was dim, curtains drawn, air heavy with the smell of dust and regret. The couch I'd grown up on had a tear down the middle, and piles of unopened bills covered the coffee table like a paper graveyard. Mom sat on the edge of her seat, eyes red and swollen. It's just bad luck, she said, voice trembling. Your father's hours got cut. The bank's been unfair. We just need a little help to get back on our feet. Dad sat beside her, silent, staring at the floor. His hands fidgeted, rough and tired. He couldn't even meet my eyes. And then there was Kyle, sprawled across a recliner, scrolling on his phone like none of it mattered. He didn't look ashamed or even worried. Just bored. Do you even care what's happening? I asked him quietly. He shrugged without looking up. It's not my fault the economy sucks. That sentence had shattered whatever pity I had left. Mom stood and grabbed my arm, tears spilling. Please, honey. You have money. Just help us this once. You know, we'd do it for you. I almost gave in. My throat ached. My chest felt tight. Part of me, the same naive part, that once believed their promises wanted to fix it, to hand over the money and make the pain stop. But then I looked at Kyle's blank expression, my mother's manipulative tears, and my father's silent guilt. Something inside me hardened. I pulled away gently, walked out the door, and stood on the porch. Staring at the house that had never really felt like home, you chose him. Now live with it. After that visit, the silence came fast. No calls, no messages, no good mornings or how are yous. It was like I'd been erased from their lives overnight. When I finally heard from them again, it wasn't a conversation, it was an attack. Mom's voice trembled with anger as she called me selfish, ungrateful, heartless. You've changed, she spat over the phone. You've forgotten who raised you. I didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. The guilt came in waves, though quiet and suffocating. Every night, I'd stare at my ceiling and wonder if I'd gone too far. But then I'd remember Kyle sitting there, scrolling on his phone while our mother cried. And I knew the truth, I hadn't abandoned them. I'd just stopped being their lifeline. So I buried myself in work. My job became my escape. I took on new projects, earned a promotion, and even started therapy. For the first time, I was learning to separate love from obligation. Still, there were moments, small, sharp ones, where I missed them, not for who they were, but for who I wished they could have been. Months passed before I heard anything substantial. A mutual friend mentioned they'd lost the house. The bank took it after months of unpaid mortgage. Kyle had moved in with an old friend, and my parents were renting a small apartment on the outskirts of town. Hearing it hit harder than I expected, I sat in my car afterward, hands gripping the steering wheel, feeling a strange mix of sorrow and relief. They'd fallen apart without me, and part of me hated that I wasn't surprised. Yet beneath the guilt was something quieter peace. For the first time in my life, I wasn't holding their world together. I was finally free to build my own. It was a quiet Thursday night when I heard a knock at the door. The sound was hesitant 3 uneven taps, the kind that carry guilt. I opened it and froze. Kyle stood there, unshaven, clothes wrinkled, eyes hollow. He looked nothing like the golden boy my parents once adored. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. "Hey man," he muttered, shifting on his feet. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, unsure why I did. He sat at my kitchen table. Staring at the mug of coffee I set in front of him like it might solve his problems. After a long silence, he sighed. "I just need a place to crash. Things haven't been great." I folded my arms. "What happened to that job at the car lot?" He laughed bitterly. "They let me go. Said I wasn't a team player, whatever that means." Then, quieter, "Family's all we've got, right?" The irony nearly made me laugh. I remembered every moment he'd mocked me, every time he'd shrugged off responsibility while I picked up the pieces. The nights I worked doubles while he coasted on charm, and now he was sitting in my kitchen, asking for shelter from the wreckage he built himself. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw the past in his face. I just said, "You can shower and eat something. There's food in the fridge." His eyes flickered with relief until I added, "But you can't stay here." His mouth opened, but no words came out. For once, he had nothing to say. He left that night without looking back. I stood at the window watching his figure fade into the streetlight's glow, and felt something I hadn't in years. Calm helping doesn't mean letting you hurt me again. A few months passed before I heard from my parents again. This time, their tone was different, soft, tired, and strangely humble. Mom's voice wavered through the phone. "We were wrong," she said quietly. "About everything. About you, about Kyle. All of it." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I had spent years wishing for those words, but now that they'd finally arrived, they felt hollow, like a confession whispered too late. Dad took over the call, his voice rough with age. "He's not talking to us anymore," he admitted. "Kyle says we ruined his life, that we always babied him, that it's our fault he can't hold a job." I closed my eyes, leaning back against the wall. The irony was almost poetic. They had built him into a man who couldn't stand on his own, and now they were left to face the version of themselves they'd created. "I'm sorry you're going through that," I said gently. "But I can't fix it for you," Mom sniffled. "We're not asking for money, sweetheart. We want to make things right." For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger, I felt peace. "Then start by taking responsibility," I told them. "Love without accountability isn't love, it's control. And that's what it's been for as long as I can remember." There was a long silence. I could almost hear the weight of my words settling on them, like they were realizing something they'd avoided for decades. Mom whispered, "You've really changed." "No," I said softly. "I finally stopped apologizing for who I am." When the call ended, I didn't feel triumphant or cold, just steady. For the first time, the balance had shifted. They were no longer leaning on me. They were looking into a mirror and seeing themselves clearly for the first time. Years passed, and life slowly settled into something I could finally call peace. My home was quiet, filled with the kind of stillness that once scared me but now felt like strength. I'd built a stable career, surrounded myself with people who valued honesty over appearances, and learned that success wasn't about money, it was about breathing without guilt. Every now and then, bits of family news reached me through distant relatives. Kyle still drifted from job to job, blaming everyone but himself. My parents had moved into a small rental apartment in a quiet neighborhood. They weren't wealthy, but they'd stopped bailing him out. I heard Mom had started volunteering at a local food bank, and Dad kept to his garden. For the first time, It sounded like they were finally learning humility without me having to teach it. One evening, while driving home from work, I took a wrong turn and ended up on the old street where we used to live. My chest tightened as the familiar outline of our family house came into view. Only it wasn't our house anymore. Fresh paint covered the walls, new shutters framed the windows, and the front yard bloomed with color. A young couple stood outside laughing as their toddler chased a ball across the grass. For a moment, I just sat there in my car watching them. That house had once been the centerpiece of every argument, every sacrifice, every manipulation. They'd risked it all for Kyle, for appearances, for control, and in the end, they lost it. But looking at it now, thriving under new ownership, I realized something beautiful. It wasn't a monument to loss anymore. It was a reminder that some things need to break before you can finally let them go. I smiled, started the car, and drove away. They taught me money can buy cars, but not character. I bought my peace instead.